If you were sent to prison unrightfully and a vampire-loving priest turned your father's brain into a wet toast, what would you do? This is How to Beat JoJo's Bizarre Adventure Stone Ocean. Jolene Cujo just got sentenced to 15 years in prison for a crime she didn't commit. She was set up by her ex-boyfriend and a shady lawyer he hired. Jolene's ex-boyfriend Romeo drove a car while drunk, and while under the influence he hit a man. With the right payment, the lawyer tricked Jolene into admitting the crime and thus free Romeo from his charges that would be to come. I know it is bad, but we need to be prepared for prison. As you will see later, the Green Dolphin State Prison isn't really a nice place, and neither are the inmates, nor the guards. There are two essential things we need for the prison: money and friends. Luckily, we made a friend on the ride to the prison. Her name is Ermes, and it's a good start. But we need to bring money inside the prison. As to be expected, the currency still holds value. And this will give us an advantage over the bad things that are to come. You will see soon enough. Now, it's very hard to get stuff into prison, of course. But as you will see later, the guards are rather corrupt. So our first step will be to take all the money from our bank account or multiple accounts and take them in cash with us. Every guard who checks gets a cut. So we'll hopefully be able to smuggle some of it into the prison. Even then, it's unlikely. But there's another way. And this way is the visiting room. Grab a friend and tell them to buy the same shoes you have in prison. As they meet up with you, they'll come in these shoes and exchange one shoe where the money is deposited with one of yours. Of course, this requires a friend. A friend outside the prison is nice, but a friend inside the prison is better. So, how are we going to make friends inside the prison? The first step will be to enter a group. It doesn't really matter what group you're joining as long as you're joining a group. Since we've established that you now have money inside the prison, it will be rather easy because you will be useful for them. No matter what group you get in, just play along. Play as if you were one of them and like if you were sharing interests. Being generally nice helps in the outside world, in the prison as well, but you should be wary because being too nice will get you labeled as weak. It's also best to not lend any money, but to purchase things that are useful to your group. The group will keep you protected from any harm that could come to you, and as we will soon find out, this could be important. Now that we are prepared, we head into the prison. But at the end of the ride, something weird happens. Jolene is stung by a little rock inside a medallion that her father sent her. And as we will soon find out, she developed a weird power, a stand. This is important because if something this bizarre happens, we should be wary of the fact that there might be other things that get rather bizarre. So we need to be extra careful while inside the prison. After Jolene has been thoroughly searched, she gets into her cell and also meets her cellmate, Gwes. And from the get-go, it's obvious that she is weird and will probably only do harm to us. Gwes acts very aggressively as Jolene tries to lay her stuff on the upper bed. We should keep this aggressive behavior in mind and also her ability to talk herself out of these situations. It's most likely that she's a very manipulative person and we shouldn't trust her and probably keep our distance to her. This feeling is only reinforced when Jolene notices that Gwes carries a little bird, but she notices that the head falls off and there come little hands out of it. As I said, a bizarre thing happened and others are to follow. So by now we should just stay away from Gwes and don't interact with her at all. Gwes notices that Jolene discovered her little secret and goes on to shrink her and put her inside a little mouse costume. Now this is terrifying. Being shrunk by a psychopath inmate, not a great situation. However, we need to stay calm and think about what happened to us. Fleeing is not really an option because in a prison most of the parts of the building you're not allowed to go. And it is to be expected that if she can shrink you, she can revert the effect. And imagine popping up at some point you are not allowed to be. This will at least get you a beating from the guards, if not being shot dead. So if we flee, we have to be aware of our surroundings and where we are at the moment. As we'll soon find out, the further we get from Gwes, the weaker the shrinking effect is. and we will grow to our normal size again. Now, despite Gwes's aggressive nature, she has some compassion towards us while we are in the mouse costume. She insists that mice don't talk, so we should just shut up and don't talk, because otherwise she will be back in her aggressive mindset. She sends Jolene to scavenge for information inside the prison while she's camouflaged as a rat. I would use that opportunity to gather some sort of little sharp object, because it is shown that Gwes likes to hold her little pets really near her face, and if you can hit a vital point with that sharp little object, you might get an advantage over her. As we know from previous parts, a stance effect can be reverted when the user is distracted, goes KO, or just doesn't concentrate on keeping the ability up anymore. However, Gwes only sent Jolene to torture her and de-shrink her basically while she's at a place where she will get shot if the guards notice her. However, we are soon to find out that the stand Goo Goo Dolls, the stand of Gwes, needs to be in the close proximity of the victim to work. And if a stand is hurt, the user is hurt. But only a stand can hurt another stand. So Jolene uses her stand for the first time, which can turn Jolene's body and the stand's body into strings. She uses that to tie up Goo Goo Dolls and thus hurt Gwes. Gwes is now forced to shrink Jolene again and get her out of the dangerous situation. Now, after beating Gwes, she's kind of a subordinate to Jolene, which can be very useful and will be useful later because her abilities to shrink someone can get very handy. For now, it will grant us the ability to easily get smaller items inside the prison, or reach places we couldn't reach normally. However, next up, Jolene receives the message that her father is coming to visit her. And just moments before entering the visiting room, a small child warns Jolene that it is not safe in the room. This child's name is Emporio, and seemingly his ability is to vanish and appear in the prison wherever and however he likes. Now, the fact that that is very bizarre shouldn't bother us by now because we've seen enough. But the warning should be a red flag, and we shouldn't enter the room without giving care. Emporio hands Jolene a little bone, which will come in useful later, but for now we should concentrate on not just going into the room. In fact, we should use Gwes's power, shrink ourselves, and somehow get into the room without anyone noticing. This way, we might be able to avoid the trap that was set for us. Jolene enters the room anyway and sits down with her father. Her father tells her that he plans to free Jolene from the prison, as all this was a setup to lure Jojo here, but they are unable to finish their conversation as they get attacked by the man who set up Jolene, called John Gully A. He is attacking from afar with a sniper rifle and his stand, which makes him able to shoot the bullets around corners, etc. The stand reads the movements of the air and thus can detect anything moving around. Jolene is almost shot but is able to block the bullet with her stand, creating a mesh which doesn't negate all damage but stops the bullet from penetrating her body. We should keep that in mind, that our stand can block bullets. While distracted, Jojo takes a bullet for his daughter. And we don't want this to happen again. So we need a strategy to distract the stand. We need to remember, the stand is blind and only tracks the movement of the air. And this is where Jojo's stand comes into play. As we know from part 3, he was able to suck up a stand that covered a whole graveyard, and it was a very, very big graveyard, almost the size of a little village. So to some extent, the stand Star Platinum has a very high lung capacity. What I would suggest is that Star Platinum takes a deep breath and hits the stand of John Gully A with a high pressure air bullet. But we don't even need to do that because the stand of Jotaro can stop time for a couple of seconds. So he could just stop the time, hit the enemy stand down, and thus incapacitating John Gully A. Jotaro doesn't do that though, because everything that happened since Jolene sat down at the table was an illusion created by another stand. But Jolene doesn't know that yet. She goes on to flee out of the room and get below the prison inside a sewer system. Now at this point, things are getting stranger. A guard who was previously knocked out by Jolene randomly appears down in these sewers. Also, her and Jotaro's injuries are just gone. If Jolene paid more attention as she would have noticed. And she should have paid more attention because we established that the bizarre things happened in such a frequency that it is most likely they won't stop happening anytime soon. So being wary of everything that happens around you is very important. Jolene doesn't know the abilities of Jotaro's stand, so in her illusion they are not used by her father. Jolene wakes up because of the bone that he received from Emporio stinging into her hand and creating a wound. Barely being able to keep herself awake, she uses her stand to wake up Jotaro, which after waking up punches her out of her seat and against the door. Almost unable to move, Jolene crawls out of the room and then pulls Jotaro out as well. They manage to escape the illusion. Forced to make a move, Jotaro and Jolene go on to try and escape. I would go back to Gwes, make her shrink me and my father, and escape through the fence. But Jotaro and Jolene decide against that, and on their way to the exit face John Gallier. While in the fight, John Gallier fires a couple of bullets in the direction of Jolene, and Jotaro uses his time stop to protect her. But he notices the stand Whitesnake creeping up behind them, leaving him with no other choice to protect his daughter and taking a hit from Whitesnake. The hit is more fatal than death though, because suddenly two weird discs are ejected from Jotaro's face. One of the discs containing his memories and the other disc containing his stand. This was the plan of the main antagonists all along. But as we soon find out, it's not John Gallier. Without his stand and without his memories, Jotaro goes into a death-like state and his brain is practically toast. And at that point we should remember that Jolene's stand is able to block bullets, but she probably wasn't fast enough, so there wasn't any other way than for Jotaro to sacrifice himself to save his daughter. After defeating John Gallier, Jolene carries and gives his body to the Speedwagon Foundation, who brings him back to a hospital. Determined to save her father, Jolene goes back inside the prison to find the discs that were stolen. And this is probably the only way to save our father. We could just escape, but I don't think this is a good choice, as, well, we want to save Jotaro. So back in the prison we go to find the disc that will save our father's life. In the meantime, Ermes Costello wakes up from her fever. This fever was caused by her also getting stung by the mysterious stone inside the pendant that Jotaro sent to Jolene. And just as Jolene, Ermes developed a stand. And this stand is able to create a copy of any item or even body part that Ermes puts one of her stickers on. After the sticker is torn up from the item again, the copy and the real item will smack together and take damage in the process. And at this point we have to keep in mind that her stand is not developed yet into her humanoid form, but it's just some stickers that grow out of her hand. Also, I want to say again, it's absolutely bonkers that some weird stickers growing out of your hand can multiply objects and body parts. So expect something bizarre again, just as I said with Jolene. Ermes is crapped on by a guy called Thunder McQueen. She knocks out a memory disk of his, which is just the same as with Jotaro. But as he still has his stand disk, he doesn't go into a death-like state like Jotaro did. Through his memory disk, Ermes sees that he, McQueen, keeps $5,000 stashed away inside a barrel somewhere in the prison. However, McQueen notices the loss of his memories and links his stand to Ermes. And this stand reflects any damage that McQueen does to himself onto Ermes. But it's important to note that damage that is done to him by Ermes, for example, doesn't affect Ermes. We see that later as Ermes smacks him down with a broom. The problem with this though is that McQueen is very suicidal and is constantly trying to end himself. And for us there are only two options to defeat him. Knock him out or persuade his mood into not wanting to kill himself anymore. And as we will soon find out, it is very unlikely that he will stop attempting this. So knockout it is. I would suggest playing nice, getting closer to him and earning his trust. Then I would take an item, put a sticker on it and hold the item and the copy of one and the other side of his head. Then I would take off the sticker and let the item smack him in the head from both sides. Preferably a rather big item and a heavy item as well. This would probably include the danger of killing him, but it's better him than us. As it comes to the stand, there's no real way to avoid it, as it spawns at the exact same area. Damage is inflicted on the body of McQueen. So for example, as he tries to hang himself, there are little propellers spawning at the neck of Ermes, pulling her in the air, and resulting in her suffering the same effect that McQueen is suffering. So no protective gear or anything will keep us safe from his suicide attempts. After a couple of these, Ermes flees and meets Emporio. But after suffering new wounds, Ermes knows that he has to defeat McQueen before she will be free from this link. So she finds him and knocks him out. Then she takes his memory disks and finds the money. $5,000 are a lot, so it's great that we now have access to a lot of money. After these events, Ermes and Jolene meet up again. They volunteer to go out and search for 2 missing prisoners and are given explosive bracelets that will go off when they get too far away from their supervisor. While on their way, this supervisor picks on Ermes and is trying to push her into crocodile poo. Jolene promptly reacts and pulls, with the use of her stand, a leaf under Ermes, thus protecting her from the poo and splashing it onto the guard. And things like that swallow your pride. It's not good to mess with the guards. Especially when you know they are corrupt and will do anything they want, basically. Take the shit-covered pants and deal with it. It's not worth receiving a beating just because of a minor inconvenience. There are worse things in a prison than that. Now, the reason Jolene and Ermes volunteered to go on the search is to find more discs like the ones they've seen before, and to eventually find Jojo's discs. Another look on the disc that Ermes gathered from McQueen tells them that there are hidden discs in a barn nearby. Jolene and Ermes were previously a group of 5 inmates, but now they are 6. Probably there's an enemy that infiltrated them. And as I said, if bizarre things happen, there are more bizarre things to come. They should have checked every person they've gone out with and remember what they look like. If they did that, they would have immediately noticed who the imposter is. They are soon to find out that there really is an imposter. A living plankton colony called Foo Fighters. But in fact, she took over everybody except Ermes and Jolene in this entire group. FF, the shortened form of Foo Fighters, kills the supervisor and drags him into a lake. This activates the explosive bracelets because the supervisor is getting further and further away. And at that point it is to note that Foo Fighters itself is a somewhat other entity than the stand itself, but later they are just the same body. I don't know, but whatever. Ermes tries to get the body of the security guard back so they won't blow up, while Jolene is fighting FF in the barn. And first you might think that because FF is made of plankton, she is dependent on water. But in all actuality, it's not all plankton that is dependent on water, although it's mostly associated with that. There's actually airborne plankton. Airborne plankton is microscopic though, so it's unlikely that this colony is airborne plankton. Nonetheless, plankton is very susceptible to gasoline or oil. And in the barn where Jolene and FF are fighting, there's a tractor with a tank. So gasoline is available as well as oil. Plankton that comes in contact with gasoline or oil will immediately die. It has a very toxic reaction to every life form basically. So Jolene should use her stand to break the tank of the tractor and soak the soil in gasoline. As we will soon find out, FF is very dependent on water and will immediately die if she doesn't get any of it. A dry soil below her is enough to make her go to the brink of death. If she happened to absorb any gasoline or oil, she would probably immediately die or get very, very weak. As the fight goes on, Jolene notices that FF is only protecting the barn. She's not actively hunting for Jolene or Ermes. FF's only reason for being here is to protect the discs. In all actuality, she didn't mean any harm. And after defeating, Jolene saves FF. FF goes on to inhabit one of the prisoners' bodies and is now a part of our group. She will come in very handy because she can actually heal wounds with ease, as long as there's water supply for her. To the viewer, it is revealed that the main enemy of Stone Ocean is the priest of the prison, Father Pucci. Father Pucci gives a stand to this girl called Mirachon, who who approaches Jolene, Ermes and FF. Jolene and FF are throwing a baseball between each other and almost caught the ball 100 times. Mirachon proposes a bet that they won't make it to 100. After a bit of discussing, they accept the bet. And this is the first mistake. Someone randomly approaching you and offering you $100 inside a prison just to throw a ball another 13 times is very unlikely. There were multiple very strange things that already happened to us. We shouldn't, under any circumstances, accept that bet. And Jolene and Ermes even realize. They realize this might be the doing of the enemy, but they still accept the bet. However, the bet is very loosely set. It is only stated that the ball has to be caught 100 times in total, not by whom at all. Also, the rule is that FF and Jolene stay apart at least 3 meters and only hold the ball in their hands for 10 seconds at most. So what I would do is simply go to a wall and bounce the ball 100 times very close from the wall back into my hand. So we get the $100 and can just leave with it. After successfully throwing the ball between each other, FF and Jolene are proposed another bet to do the same exact thing again, but now for $1,000. I would simply do the same thing and throw it against the wall with a very short distance between me and the wall. The specified distance was between Jolene and FF. And as we'll find out, the specifications of the bet are very important. The stand of Mirachon, the debt collector, Marilyn Manson, is very specific in when he's collecting the debt. So if the rules are able to be worked around, we should definitely do that. Jolene goes on to find her own workaround and beats up Mirachon with the ball, bouncing it back into her hand and in the effect catching it. With a lot richer, they leave Mirachon behind. Next up, Jolene makes a call to the Speedwagon Foundation to tell them that she gathered the discs of Jotaro. They agree to meet in the courtyard of the prison so Jolene can hand them the discs. After that, Jolene meets up with Emporio and also meets a new person who is Weather Forecast. Weather Forecast has a stand as well who is able to manipulate the weather. This includes air, temperature and clouds. Weather decides to escort Jolene to the courtyard to deliver the discs. However, on their way they are tailed by Lang Ranger and his stand, Jumping Jack Spark. Jolene is hit by the spit of Lang Wrangler, and because of that, the ability of his stand affects Jolene now. And this ability is to take the gravitational pull of a person or an object. This basically means they will start floating like there's no gravity. Also, if the affected person touches someone or something, they will also be affected by that. Helplessly floating around, Jolene calls out for Weather to help her. He then touches Jolene to be also affected by Jumping Jack Spark, so he can use his stand to launch him and Jolene like a bullet through the corridor. At the moment there's only one thing I have to add. If the enemy can affect you like that, he can probably revert the effect as well and turn it off. So we shouldn't be under any heavy objects. And oh yeah, Weather Forecast just got hit by that, of course. However, Weather and Jolene move forward to the factory they need to cross to get to the courtyard. They touch the floor and the walls, so the whole room is affected by the zero gravity. This in effect causes the air to leave the room because the gravitational pull from outside this room pulls it to itself. Now effectively being in a vacuum, Jolene and Weather are in immediate danger of dying. However, Weather Forecast uses a stand to kind of build spacesuits around him and Jolene. This grants them protection and some air for a couple of minutes. Of course, being inside a vacuum is very unhealthy for us and probably not a very good situation in general, but there's one thing that we can use to our advantage. According to the law of conservation of momentum, an impulse that is given to an object will keep its energy if there is no other force having an impact on that object. In this case, the object is our body and the momentum is the one we give it by effectively launching us by hitting some sort of surface or anything. As Jolene and Weather notice really fast, there's a corner where some objects aren't floating, so there has to be air left. What I would do is use this law of physics and launch myself into the direction of this spot. Our enemy is probably there because he needs air as well. And where there is air, Weather can use his stand. his stand has so many possibilities, the enemy wouldn't stand a chance, if Weather gets in reach. However, after a lengthy fight, Jolene and Weather defeat Lang Wrangler and make it to the gate to the courtyard. Coincidentally, on the other side of this gate, Father Pucci just arrived. Unaware that he is the enemy, Jolene leaves him behind, as well as Weather Report, who is unable to move on because of the injuries. Finally reaching the courtyard, Jolene remembers that the Speedwagon Foundation told her that she will know who's the messenger who is supposed to deliver the discs to the Speedwagon Foundation. She sees a man standing in the middle of the courtyard who then turns around and shoots at her, in the process injuring her. And this could have easily been avoided. A man standing coincidentally in the middle of the courtyard while we know that the enemy knows what we are going to do. We were just attacked because we wanted to get to the courtyard. Also, a normal man isn't really that interesting, so we wouldn't know as we saw him that he is the messenger. In all actuality, the messenger is a bird, a pigeon. After being shot, Jolene is incapacitated and loses the stand discs. To save her, Weather Forecast sends a rain of poisonous frogs. This rain is not very precise though, so it affects the whole area. The frogs smashing down onto the ground releases their toxic poison, who in contact with the human body melts its flesh down. What Jolene should have done is build a mesh with the fibers of her stand above her and use it as a umbrella basically. However, what she does is tie frogs that weren't smashed on the ground around her to deflect all the other frogs falling from the sky. After the stand of Pucci Whitesnake finds the disc, Jolene reveals herself and steals the disc with her fibers, and then quickly passing it to the messenger pigeon, who flies away, thus saving Jotaro's life. And that's it with batch 1 of How to Beat JoJo's Bizarre Adventure Stone Ocean. I will divide this into 3 parts because it really takes some time and I just want to upload something in the meantime, so I will divide it into 3 parts so you can tell me what you liked and what I should do better. And if you liked it, consider subscribing and leaving a like, because I will do the next part of this as soon as possible and the third as well. So stay tuned for that, and as I said, subscribe so you don't miss it. I hope to see you soon.